Insertions and actions. To fully understand the anatomy of the abdominal wall, we must appreciate the course of the different muscle attachments, sheaths, and aponeuroses. We can see here that the deep layer of the abdominal wall is made of the transversus abdominis. An opening in its sheath at the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall enables the rectus abdominis to pass through. The upper part of the rectus abdominis is covered by an aponeurosis created by the internal obliques. Superficial to that aponeurosis lies another aponeurosis created by the external oblique. Let's examine the various muscles and sheaths in relation to the arcuate line. The rectus abdominis runs posterior to the transverse abdominis, inferior to the arcuate line, and moves anteriorly superior to the arcuate line. Superior to the arcuate line, the internal oblique aponeurosis splits to envelop the rectus abdominis. Superficial to the internal oblique aponeurosis is the external oblique muscle at aponeurosis. Now let's examine the origin and insertion of each of these muscles. The rectus abdominis originates, proximal attachments, from the pubic symphysis and the pubic crest. Moving up through the transversus, it inserts distal attachments to the xiphoid process of the sternum and costal cartilages of ribs 5 through 7. The internal obliques, superficial in relation to the transversus abdominis, originate, proximal attachments, from the thoracolumbar fascia, anterior iliac crest, and the lateral half of the inguinal ligament. Its insertion, distal attachments, is the abdominal aponeurosis along the linea alba and inferior borders of the lower 3 ribs and their costal cartilages. The external obliques originate, proximal attachment, from the external surfaces of the 5th to 12th ribs, moving anteriorly and inferiorly to be inserted, distal attachments, into the anterior iliac crest and the abdominal aponeurosis along the linea alba. Ventrally, it builds a large aponeurosis, which extends medially to the linea alba. The deepest layer is made of the transversus abdominis. This part of the abdominal wall originates, proximal attachments, from the thoracolumbar fascia, anterior iliac crest, lateral half of the inguinal ligament, and the cartilages of ribs 6 through 12. It inserts, distal attachments, in the abdominal aponeurosis along the linea alba and to the pubic symphysis. The rectus abdominis innervation comes from the anterior rami of the thoracic spinal nerves, T7 to T12. The internal obliques innervation comes from the anterior rami of the thoracic spinal nerves, T7 to T12 and L1. The external obliques innervation comes from the anterior rami of the thoracic spinal nerves, T7 to T12. The transversus abdominis innervation comes from the anterior rami of the thoracic spinal nerves T7 to T12 and L1. The actions of the abdominal muscles are spinal flexion, posterior pelvic tilt, lateral flexion of the trunk and spine, and horizontal rotation of the trunk and spine. The transversus abdominis also can increase intra-abdominal pressure. To strengthen the abdominal muscles, you can perform different variations of crunches. To stretch your abdominal muscles, utilize trunk extension with anterior pelvic tilt.